Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauryn, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Hey, so I wanted to start today's episode by answering a question from a listener. So back in our October series, we talked all things real estate. And avid listener Stacy wanted me to answer a question about capital gains. So we're going to start there today. So capital gains, what are they? This is taxes that you are paying on an asset when you sell it. So this can apply to investments, stocks, bonds, and real estate, which is what she specifically wanted to know about because we were talking real estate. So the good news about capital gains in real estate is that if you are selling your primary residence, you can exclude up to $250,000 of the capital gains on that real estate, or $500,000 if you are a married couple selling a piece of real estate. So as an example, if you bought a house for $200,000 quite a while ago and you've been living in it for a while, and then today you sold it for $800,000. That means you made $600,000 on that home. So you probably lived in it for a pretty long time if you were able to see that much appreciation. Well, if you're married, 500 of that 600 is not going to count. And the 100,000 is what you're going to pay capital gains on. Whereas if you are single, there's only $250,000 that you can write off. So that's the good news, that there is an exclusion that can help you not pay so much taxes on the appreciation of your property. However, there are a few things that could hold you back from taking advantage of this exclusion. So the first one, if the home was not your principal residence. Second, if you own the property for less than 2 years. So you're supposed to own it for a 5-year period before you sell it. So that 2 to 5 year window is going to allow you maybe to take some of the deduction, but not all of it. You didn't live in the house for at least 2 years before you sold it. So that's the 2 of the 5-year rule again. And then if you've already claimed the 250 or 500, depending on what your situation is, on another home in the last 2 years, you're not going to be able to claim the capital gains. So all these things exist because they're trying to avoid people who are using investment property as a way to save money on taxes. So this is meant to help people who are general homeowners who live in their home, not meant to help those that have investment property. Although sometimes people who have investment property kind of know and understand the rules and kind of, finesse this or massage it a little bit to make it happen. So long story short, how to avoid capital gains. Live in the house for at least 2 years. See whether you qualify for some sort of an exception. There are some different things that can happen if you have to move because of work, health, some unforeseeable event. The code you want to look at is going to be IRS Publication 523 if you want to see if you qualify for an exception. And then last but not least, to keep receipts for home improvements, because when we think about how our house may have appreciated, we're going to have to look at what we call our basis. So our basis is this amount that you have in the house already. So it's not only what you purchased it, but all of the improvements that you made over the years. So that's going to higher your basis, the less gains you're going to have. So while if you made some home improvements, those are things that are going to increase your basis, decrease the capital gains, and in effect, lower your tax liability. So the long story short is if you are in a situation where you think you might be having to pay capital gains, get a good accountant. Do not be so cheap that you're not willing to spend the money to make sure that things get done right. We're talking saving money on taxes. You don't want to finagle things, get it wrong, get audited, and end up in trouble. It is well worth the expense of an accountant so that you can take advantage of any tax breaks or strategy that exists. And I highly recommend speaking to an accountant before you are in the sales situation. So if you've already sold, don't do your taxes yourself that year. But if you have not yet sold and you're thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense to spend some time on a tax projection and getting a really good understanding of how these things work via an accountant before you sell so that you know, oh, maybe next year's a better year. Getting married, or maybe next year's a better year because fill in the blank. That's what an accountant is there for. And it's well worth the investment of those dollars to make sure that you're not wasting dollars on the back end. I love answering questions from listeners. Stacy has been a loyal listener. She's always willing to provide feedback. I want to encourage anybody else who's listening and has questions. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'll answer your question on the show too. We love the feedback. So email us, slide in our DMs, tweet us. You can find Worth Winning and Worth Listening on all the social media platforms. And our email address is podcast@worth-listening.com. Okay, let's get back to our year-end wrap-up. Many of us started 2020 pumped because not only were we in the beginning of a new year, but also the beginning of a new decade. You may have started this year with, I am about to fill in the blank. But then what happened was, oh my goodness, we've been thrown so many curveballs. We've all had to make changes, choices, and sacrifices. And I love the saying of another financial expert, Patrice Washington, that it's important for us to look at the lesson and the blessing in all that is transpiring around us. While the narrative for 2020 has been overwhelmingly negative, some have had their best year ever. And it's not something to be ashamed of. If you have not listened to the first episode that we had in December, I highly recommend not skipping it. Go back because we talked about all things financial therapy. And within that kind of purview, like I said, if you had a really tough 2020, what to be thinking about there, but also if you didn't have a tough 2020 and you're suffering from what we call survivor's guilt, how to manage and deal with those sorts of things. So really, really great episode on the emotions of money last week. Today, I want to discuss financial resilience. It's a term being said more and more, but what does it mean? So let's start by talking about this definition of resilience. We got three different kind of options here. The first is the power or the ability for something to return to its original form after being bent, compressed, or stretched. I think we can all agree that we have been bent, stretched, and all sorts of things, and we are trying to work our way back into some form of normalcy. The second one is the ability of a person to adjust or to recover readily from illness, adversity, or major changes. And I think the key part of this definition is the recovery part of things. How do we take major life changes and then recover from them? Last but not least, the ability of a system or organization to respond or recover readily from crisis or a disruptive process. I think we can all agree, whether it has been overall good or bad for you this year, that 2020 was very disruptive to our lives. Like I said, we've all had to make some changes and life is going to throw us some curveballs. I was supposed to go on a trip from December the 5th to the 19th, and I was so excited. It was planned well in advance, and I made sure that I told all my clients and that my staff knew. And we shut the calendar down for the month of December because when I return, it's going to be the holidays. And, I did all these things to get ready only for the trip to be canceled a week before I was supposed to depart. So here I am scrambling, not just to decide what do I do now that I have this kind of big window of time that no longer is accounted for, but I also had to reorganize my finances around this as well, because that was one sort of financial setup I had planned for, and now it was completely different. The cancellation of that trip changed everything for me for the whole month of December and really even heading into January. I didn't do anything wrong, but now I'm having to adjust. And I think we found ourselves in this situation quite a bit this year. You may have had to adjust your whole budget 4 or 5 times this year because of various things that have happened. that were way beyond your control. So whether that is job loss, whether that was a promotion because they minimized the number of people in your unit and you were taking on more responsibility, but also having less time available. We've all had all kinds of things come up against. Computer purchases is one I've heard quite a bit for those in households with children where they were previously going to school and they were sharing one household computer and now everyone's at home and they need electronic devices in order to be able to do their schoolwork. Budget change immediate and computers overnight became a necessity. But financial resilience is all about recovery. So while we are going through some things, what can we do to get ourselves back on track? The first thing I want to encourage you to do is not to chase money. Chasing money is unproductive. Money will come as a natural byproduct of leaning into your purpose and using your gifts. I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but we cannot be on the grind chasing the money around because, quite frankly, it's hard to catch up with. It's all over the place. We have to be very strategic about how we invite money into our lives. So one of the things I would say we can do to practice financial resilience and start to recover from the 2020 curveballs is put some systems in place. Putting systems in place starts with knowing what your priorities are. What are the things that are important to you? What are the things that you absolutely need to do? Needs versus wants. And when we think about needs, your sanity is important. So maybe something sounds like a want to some other people, but if you need to go to the gym to burn off stress and keep yourself in a situation where you can go to and complete your daily work duties, then that may truly not be a discretionary cost for you. So understand what your priorities are, put some systems in place. And so when I say systems, we always talk about the big bad budget word here, but there's some bucket budgets you can put in. And then there's kind of like the backup plans. What can we think of? When poop hits the fan, I'm going to pull from this account first. So maybe you have a travel budget somewhere and you have an emergency fund. You might have to tap into it, but where do I go next after my emergency fund? I go to my travel budget, or maybe I go to my travel budget first before I kick into my emergency fund. Systems will help us be able to pivot really quickly when the unforeseen happens. Part 2 of leaning into financial resilience is looking at your habits and seeing what is working for you. This is going to require doing some reflection, but those habits are the things that we got to figure out. Are some of them good? Some of them bad? I do this every single morning. And like you said, it gives me peace and it gives me joy and I need to continue to do it. And I want to work that into my budget because it's important to me. Or I know that when I'm really stressed, as I have been many times this year, I fill in the blank, shop on Amazon more. Maybe it's going out to Starbucks versus making your coffee at home. Pretty typical thing a lot of people talk about. But what are the things that are your habits? And are these working for you or are they working against you? Only you get to decide which of those things is and is not a good habit to have. But you first have to recognize those habits. So look at your daily life, look at your, monthly bills process. What habits do you have? Are they working for you or not? Another big part of financial resilience is leaning into advocacy. This could be advocacy for yourself, where you talk to your landlord or you start talking to your friends about money. Who do you need to call to say, hey, I can't pay this bill right now? Who do you need to stand up to say, I can no longer continue to support you? My finances have changed. Advocating for yourself and on your behalf and speaking up to talk about money is a really important part of resiliency. And maybe it's not, like I said, a negative thing, because there are tons of people who need to advocate for themselves or others in a positive way. Resiliency is about advocating for humanity as well. This is not all about us, the individual person. We are a part of a bigger environment. So if you're in a great situation, think about who can you advocate on behalf of? Who can you help better organize their finances? Who can you speak up for? Where can you spend your dollars in a more appropriate way that is going to be more meaningful to those who are in a situation where they can't make decisions for themselves? Advocacy is all about thinking about what's right and speaking up for what you believe is right. Earlier, I talked about the idea of us having to make choices, sacrifices, and just some general changes in our lives. And I think to be resilient, you have to sometimes ask yourself, what am I willing to give up to make sure I have enough? The first thing you're going to need to do to answer that question is decide what is enough. There's this word called privilege that we throw around quite a bit now. And generally, it's in the realm of race and privilege relating to race. But if we're honest, we all have some sort of privilege. To be living in America, a first world country, comes with tons and tons of privilege. So when we think about this question, what is enough? We also have to think about our privilege and what are privileges versus what are needs, what are our wants, and then circle back to that question. What are you willing to give up to make sure that you have whatever your enough is? And I think it's important that we realize that your enough and someone else's enough don't have to be the same thing. You just have to organize your budget so that you feel good about what your enough is and what are the things that you need to give up in order to make sure that you have that enough. So often I see people that appear to be confident and successful, but they're still operating from a place of fear and doubt. They're struggling, they're worried, or they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, as the saying goes. But if you're really focused on what your enough is, and you're confident in that enough, that will help melt away that fear and doubt of what others may or may not have. Comparison is one of the ugly things that we don't need to spend a lot of time on because it is unproductive. What is in my wallet and versus what's in your wallet doesn't matter. I could be a millionaire, but if I spend $999,000, or is that right number? 900 and you guys get the point. Um, and you have $100, but you have 99 of it in the bank. You could be in a better situation than that person who makes a lot more. So it's not our place to say, oh, this is how I would spend that money if I had it, or this is how I should be spending money because this is how someone in my network is living. That person could be buying everything on debt. It may look like they're living a nice lifestyle, that they're earning a lot and that they're doing the responsible things, but you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And so while some people can appear to be confident and successful, behind the scenes, they may be operating in a place that's not, they may be operating from a place that's not authentic, which is why you need to focus on what your enough is. And so how do we find out what our enough is? Well, we got to take inventory. You are not the only person who does not know what is coming in or going out. So statistically, more people listening do not have a budget or a clear understanding of how much they earn or how much they spend than those that do. That's why podcasts and financial resources like this exist. It is okay. Don't be ashamed. Just start to take inventory now. And even taking inventory doesn't mean that you're going to have a nice, neat monthly budget that you monitor every single day or every single week, or, like I said, that you even check in on once a month. While that is ideal, stopping just to take inventory every once in a while is an important and productive thing to do. What does it look like to take inventory? Write down what's coming in and what absolutely every single month has to go out. Then you're going to find this black hole of money that is what's left over. That's kind of I feel like I need this, or, I got to run to the store and grab this. Those are the unaccounted for dollars that kind of slide out of our pockets and we're not really sure what happens. Take that inventory and see like, wow, there should be X number of dollars left over. There's like $500 every month that I don't really know where it's going. Well, what if I decided to automatically start saving 250 of those dollars? And now I still have 250 that can go into the black hole. The black hole is okay to a certain extent. We're all going to have discretionary expenses. We're going to have, want to pick up a candy bar on the way to the store. We're going to grab an umbrella because we were out and it started raining and we hadn't planned on it. Those things are okay, but you got to start by taking inventory occasionally to make sure that your expenses have not creeped up on you. And that's going to make you more resilient. Now, I do want to say that sometimes it's discouraging when you see, the real numbers behind things, but doing that math will help you get started. So put the number at the top. What am I bringing in? Back out all the things that have to go out on a monthly basis and then look at what's left over. Resilience is accepting your new reality, even if it's less good than what you had before. You can fight it. You can do nothing but scream about what you've lost, or you can accept that something has happened and try to put together something that's good. We're all in this together. Resilience is about leaning on one another to continue to pull each other up in a time that is just unbelievably unprecedented. I'm so sick of hearing the word unprecedented this year, but it is. So let's band together and continue to focus on how we can be resilient. Next week, we will discuss considerations of being an employee versus being an entrepreneur. Many entrepreneurs have decided to go back to work after the events of this year, and many employees who were laid off don't want to be in a situation where they're depending on someone else for their paycheck, and so they're thinking about jumping ship into the entrepreneurial world. Next week, we're going to talk all things employee versus entrepreneur and how to kind of sort through what may be most appropriate for you. As always, if you have questions, suggestions for guests, or would like to share your own money memoir, please do not hesitate to reach out. worth-listening.com.